Shalom lekulam. Today, we're going to learn about the Satmar opposition to Zionism. Just to recap the last few classes. In the first class, we spoke about the Haredi outlook to learning in universities, to going out into the Enlightenment world. The reasons that they were against it were mainly because of intermarriage and people starting to leave Torah and mitzvot and the Torah's way. And then we learned a little bit about Zionism. We learned that the main opposition to Zionism is because it's being done by Chilonim, and that's not the way it was supposed to be done. And also that if people draft to the army, take part in the state of Israel, eventually they're going to be not religious, and that is a danger for the future of Judaism. And another practical reason is because that Zionism changed the Torah and mitzvot. Up until Zionism, you were defined as a Jew by the amount of mitzvot that you kept or didn't keep. But here, for the first time in history, you could be a Jew not being obligated to keep Torah mitzvot. That is the mainstream Haredi issue with Zionism, not Satmar. Satmar comes from a different place totally. They view Zionism as something that theologically is against HaKadosh Baruch Hu, against Torah and mitzvot. Not only because it's done by irreligious people, but because the fact of having a state is problematic. And we're going to get into that very, very soon. In order to understand Satmar, we need to learn about Satmar a little bit. It was established by Rav Yoel Teitelbaum, the Admor of Satmar, in 1905 in Hungary. Satmar started as a Chassidut, a branch of Sigit Chassidut, and they weren't really on the map too much at the beginning. The first few years, it was a very, very small Chassidut. Bichlal, when we talk about Chassidut, it's important to note that there's a lot of different Chassidut. There's over 4,000 Chassidut in Israel, and we know the famous ones. We might know Chabad, or Breslov, or Belz, or Gur. So Satmar is also another very large one. Today, they mainly sit in the United States, a little bit in different European countries throughout Europe, and also here in Israel, there is Satmar. But in any event, it starts by Rav Yoel Teitelbaum, 1905, and going forward around 40 years, until 1944. 1944, the Holocaust gets to Hungary, and Rav Yoel Teitelbaum is basically sent out by his Hasidim. They tried to save the Rebbe, and they sent him onto Rakevet Kastner, the Kastner train that eventually saves him with another 1,600 Jews, and it takes them to Switzerland. Now, it's an interesting anecdote to say that Kastner was a Zionist Jew, and he basically was the one that was able to make this operation happen in order to save all these Jews. And they fled to Switzerland, being saved from the Nazis. 1945, after the Holocaust, Rav Yoel Teitelbaum makes Aliyah. He moves to Israel, not because of Zionism, mamash not. We're going to get into that very, very soon. But every Jew, his place is in the land of Israel. Satmar agrees with that. They agree in the mitzvah of Yeshuv Eretz Yisrael. Soon we're going to learn what they disagree with. But in any event, he comes to Israel. He lives here for around a year and a half. Things in Israel were very hard at the time. Also, after 1948, they were hard. It's not like it got much easier quickly, but a lot of Jews came after the war to Israel and eventually left to the United States, and so does he. He tries to rebuild his kehillah, his chassidut. And not only was he successful, he was very, very successful. If the majority of the chassidut were wiped out during the Holocaust, Chassidut Satmar today is one of the biggest chassidiyot. He was able to rebuild it from the ashes, recruiting a lot of new people into the chassidut, and he made it very, very big, mainly in Williamsburg, in America, and like I said, other places in the world. But I also know a lot of people that their parents or grandparents were part of that chassidut, and they are Holocaust survivors, and they have very negative thoughts towards Satmar and towards the Satmar Rebbe, because the vast majority of the chassidut was wiped out during the Holocaust. And the Admor was able to get saved. He was saved by, like we said, with Kastner, and he was able to get out. Now, it's hard to judge someone by his actions, especially during those times. I wasn't there. I can't judge. But I also can't judge those who are upset. This happened, a similar story with Belz Chassidut, that the Rebbe was able to save himself, or they were able to save him, but the rest of the Chassidim were wiped out. And it's a really big question about leadership. Are you the first to be saved, or are you the last to save yourself? First, save your kihila. It's a very big question. We're not going to get into that too much here today, but this is a good place to note that I am not a Satmar Chassid, as I'm sure you all know and can probably also see. And I have a lot of issues and arguments with Satmar, and some of them will come out in this class. There's going to be a whole different class about that, about the Tilumi, the Zionistic reaction, or the religious Zionistic reaction to Haredim, to Satmar. We're going to keep that for one of the last classes that we're going to do in this series. In this class, I really want us to understand where they are coming from and to try to understand their philosophy. So like I said, 1946, he makes Yerida to the United States. He moves to Williamsburg, and he reestablishes his community there. In 1968, the Rebbe gets a Shavatz Mochi. He basically can't function from then until 1979, when he passes away. And the stroke really just made him not able to lead the community anymore. So that's when the split started. But what I want to focus and zoom in is not really about the Satmar Rebbe, because he was a person. He was a person that did a lot of good and a lot of bad. I want to focus more on his thoughts about what his Torah was, what he taught, because that's what we are dealing with until today. And I say when we're dealing with, it's also Chassidut Satmar, which is a pretty big Chassidut. It's also a few different fringe groups here in Israel, like Neturei Karta, like Toldot Avram, or Avram Yitzchak, Toldot Aaron. They're small Chassidiyot, but the more the years go by, I hear more and more of the Satmar talk, lingo, in the mainstream Haredi world. And that's what I want to learn today, study today, in order to try to understand what we're dealing with. So it's important to start with basically the first source. In 1959, Rav Yoel Teitelbaum writes a book called Vayol Moshe. Vayol Moshe is a book that talks about the 3 commandments that Am Yisrael were commanded. It talks about that in Masechet Ketubot. We'll learn that in a minute. Shlosh Shvuot, the book it's a very, very interesting book. I learned it in my Shir Aleph, my first year of yeshiva. I found it fascinating. I think there's a very interesting pilpul within the Agadah, there in the Gemara, within the halachas. I think that there's obviously a very big agenda to this book. But even with that agenda, it's interesting to learn the hashkafa from the sources, and not just from people that we might see in the streets or people at different rallies. Learning it through the book. We're going to do that a little bit here. So in order to understand the book, we have to understand Masechet Ketubot, Daf Kuf Yud Aleph Amud Aleph. In Masechet Ketubot, there are 3 commandments that Am Yisrael are commanded not to do once we're in Galut. Okay, it's 2 commandments for the Jews and 1 commandment for the Goyim. First commandment, Shelo Ya'alu Yisrael b'choma. Am Yisrael shouldn't make aliyah in force. In force means 2 things. Also, a nice big force of people, meaning private aliyah is always not only allowed, there's a mitzvah of Yishuv Eretz Yisrael, a private person is encouraged to make aliyah alone, as long as he's not doing it in force, not in force by numbers, and not against the goyim living here, living in the world. Okay? If you want to make aliyah, great. But if you want to make aliyah in order to establish a state here, or go against the goyim, that is a very, very big no-no. So that's the first one. Second one, you are not allowed to go against the nations of the world. Why? Because galut is a punishment. Just like if a little kid does something wrong and his father says, go to your room, don't come out until I tell you. So that means go to your room and don't come out until I tell you. Am Yisrael, we did a lot of sins. We did a lot of chata'im. And because of these sins, Hashem kicked us out of our home. Our home with HaKadosh Baruch Hu is here in Eretz Yisrael. And Hashem is telling us, don't come back until I bring you back. Don't go against the people that are keeping you there, the goyim. They're keeping you there. They're in charge of you, and they're your masters until I decide to bring you back. So what is a Jew's job while he's in Galut? To do absolutely nothing to bring himself back to Eretz Yisrael, except for keeping Torah, mitzvot, and maasim tovim. The third one is for the goyim. Shelo ishta'abdu bahen beYisrael yoter midai. Don't be too nasty to the Jews. Meaning, a pogrom here and there, inquisition, little things. I'm saying little things. It's terrible that I'm even saying that. We know that pogroms killed tens of thousands of Jews, and it was terrible. And over the years, probably hundreds of thousands, millions. Don't treat them too badly. I think when we learn this after the Holocaust, we understand what treating them too badly actually means. Because there's a very big difference between the Holocaust and every other pogrom. Pogroms are things that unfortunately happened to the Jews throughout the history, and it was terrible. The Holocaust was a systematic killing of the Jews. And I think maybe we can understand from the Gemara what too much could actually mean through the lens of the Holocaust. So these are the three commandments that the Jews and the Goyim are commanded either to keep while we're in Galut. And as a result of this, Rav Yoel Teitelbaum writes his book about his yachas, his attitude towards Zionism, and why he's so adamant against Zionism. So I'm going to read this in Hebrew, and I'm going to do translations. This is from the introduction to the book. It's just very short parts. Right? These bad people, Zionists, עשו כל מיני השתדלות לעבור על השבועות הללו, לעלות בחומה ולקח מעצמם משלב וחירות, קודם הזמן, שזהו דחיקת הקץ. These bad people, they went against these three commandments from the Gemara and Masechet Ketubot in order to take a state using their might and not Kodesh, and not Ruach. ולא באתי בקונטרס זה, אלא לברר דעת תורה. Everything that we're learning here, according to the Satmar Rebbe, is to learn Torah. It's not my own personal thing. This is what the Torah says. ועכשיו בדור השפל הזה, של עקבתא דמשיחא, עדיין לא שמנו לב שכל הצרות והתלאות שהגיעו עלינו היה בסיבת הרשעים האלה. Every single bad thing that we experience today this is post-Holocaust, happened because of those Zionist Jews. They are stopping the coming of Mashiach. They are actively stopping the coming of Mashiach, and it's because of them that we suffered all the terrible things that we suffered. If you thought it was bad, it's going to get worse in a second. Hold on. ושאל כן העמידה סטרא אחרא בשטן, מדינה ציונית ומלכותה מינות לבטל את הגאולה, והשם יתברך ירחם במהרה ויחיש לנו זמן גאולתנו ובגדוד נפשנו. כי אם ניקח את כל הפריצות הדור והעבירות המרובות הנעשות בכל העולם וישים אותם בכף מאזניים אחד, if you take all the sins, all the עבירות in the world, and you put them on one side, ומדינת הציונים בכף מאזניים השנייה, and you take this Zionistic state, and you put it on the other side, תכריע את הכל. That is equivalent to all the other avirot that there are. Chilul Shabbos, not eating kosher, murder, whatever it is, Zionism and the Jewish state, the Zionistic state in the land of Israel, that is equivalent to all these terrible things. Everything that they do there is tameh and bad. He gets into it a little bit, that the worst type of Zionists are the religious Zionists, what we call the kippot slugot, the Mizrachnikim, because they're doing it while they're keeping Shabbos and while they're doing Torah mitzvot. That's the worst. Because if a Chiloni is doing it, okay, he doesn't know that what he's doing is terrible. But once someone that learns Torah and keeps Torah mitzvot and he is Zionistic, that is the worst possible thing. And I'm going to end up with this last quote that he brings here. והיא הסיבה לשבר הנורא של הריגת 6 מיליונים מישראל. The reason that the Holocaust happened, that 6 million Jews were murdered, is because of Zionism. וגם מאז ועד עתה נהרגו הרבה רבבות, and all of this is happening because of the Jews. Even today, Jews that are being killed all over the world, it's happening because of these Zionists, and it's because of them that the 6 million Jews were wiped off the face of the earth. I want to understand through these shvuot, through these commandments, why, according to the Satmar Rebbe, this happened, and we're going to try to make a little bit sense of it. And like I said, the reaction, the halachic reaction, will be in the next shiurim. But we need to understand where they're coming from. Am Yisrael alu b'choma, according to the Satmar Rebbe, meaning Am Yisrael took action in order to make aliyah by force, and because of that, they did the second commandment, is they went against the nations of the world by coming into the Middle East and taking land from Arabs and having this war. And that's why ishtabdu b'hem yoter midai. That's why the Goyim attacked Am Yisrael on an unproportional level, like the Holocaust, killing 6 million Jews. It's because we went before the time back to the land of Israel against God's will, and that's why he allowed the Goyim to do whatever they wanted to do with us. It gets even, throughout the book, a little bit even deeper. He's saying, when we come and we say we have a government, we have a prime minister, we have an army, we're basically saying, in other words, according to the Satmar Rebbe, we don't need you, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We have a moshel. We have someone that is governing us. Who's the governor? HaKadosh Baruch Hu is supposed to govern this world. And we're saying, no, thank you. We have Binyamin Netanyahu, we have Ben Gurion, we have Rabbi, whatever, whoever it is. We don't need you, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to govern our world anymore. We're okay. We're doing it by our own. We have an army, and that army is here to replace you, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So one might ask, okay, but in the days of David HaMelech, there was a melech, there was a king, and he had an army. Or, well, let's go forward. When Mashiach comes, he's going to be Melech HaMashiach, he's going to be a king, and we're going to have an army. Yes, but that's because HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, you should have a king, you should have an army, you should have a Mashiach. But when you're doing this against HaKadosh Baruch Hu, through Chiloni people, but even if it wasn't Chiloni people, even if it was people that are Shomer, Shabbos, Torah, Mitzvot, we need to wait for Mashiach. What are you doing before the times of Mashiach bringing the Geulah? You're bringing the biggest galut. You're bringing the biggest churban. What are you doing? The Satmar Rebbe asks. You need to take a deep breath. I'm not going to answer the Tilumi answer. Also to the Gemara, the Tilumi are no less connected and mechuyavim. We're not less obligated to learn the Gemara, to keep the Gemara, to keep the Torah and mitzvot. So there are answers for all of this, which I'm going to give Bezrat Hashem next time. On purpose, I'm not giving the answers right now. I want us to dwell a second with these things that the Satmar Rebbe are saying. I want us to also look at the positive. A lot of times, especially in this period of the Geulah, we got very comfortable with thinking that this is it. Okay, Medinat Israel, this is what the prophets have been prophesizing throughout thousands of years of Jewish history. This is the bracha that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave Abraham, and that's it. We're basically done. And I think learning this, dafka, as a Datilumi person, I'm able to learn from this that, wait, we're not 100% there yet. We still have places to go, physically, spiritually, b'dagesh, mainly spiritually. We can't give up on this big dream of a ruach geula, of a spiritual geula, of Mashiach, of Bet HaMikdash, of kibbutz galuyot from a holy place. Mamash no. And you know who the Satmar Rebbe is the closest with his ideology? To Rav Kook. I know that sounds, Rav Kook was a very big Zionist, because Rav Kook saw Zionism through a spiritual lens, and also the Satmar Rebbe. Most other scholars, rabbis, people in that generation did not see it like that. They saw it as a more practical thing. If you look at the Mizrahi movement, they were Zionistic because, as a practical thing, this could save the Jews. Not because of a spiritual mahalach, of the Geulah, of redemption, no. It's because Medinat Israel could be a good safe haven for the Jews. Aguda, on the Haredi side, they didn't see this as a spiritual thing. They said, this is something that's affecting the Jews. It could also save the Jews, but it's also bad spiritually for the Jews. They didn't view it as a spiritual mahalach of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The two big gedolim of the time that did was the Satmar Rebbe and the Havdil, the Rav Kook. They viewed these things as a spiritual thing. And that's why when I learn Satmar, when I learn Shlosh Shvuot, Vayol Moshe, I learn it through a lens of someone that sees Zionism through a spiritual lens. And I view Medinat Israel and Zionism through a godly mahalach, a spiritual, divine thing that's happening in this world. I think that's the only way to look at what's happening here in Medinat Israel. I don't think there's any other way of looking at 7 million Jews living in the state of Israel, around 50% of the Jews. I don't think there's any other way looking at the wars, the miracles that we've been seeing. There's no other way than viewing it as a godly thing. And I think the Rebbe of Satmar saw that as that type of thing, but he learned exactly the opposite than the way I view it, or the way Rav Kook viewed it. If Rav Kook viewed it as a positive thing, the Satmar Rebbe saw it as a Maaseh Satan, as something like the devil created Medinat Israel. Be'ezrat Hashem, we're going to think about these things, and next class, we're going to give the Dati Lomi outlook and answer. Have a wonderful day.